We have this tweet from Tayler Hansen. Can't make this up.
I always do that too.
On my flight home to DFW to Salt Lake City, I have an illegal immigrant, a former soldier from Venezuela, seated next to me on American Air. Every time I fly back to SLC, I have illegal immigrants on my flights. Despite Governor Cox claiming it's not happening, Utah has become the home for over 88,000 illegal immigrants. As you can see in the documents, he is prior military. In another portion of the documents, it details how he came alone despite having a wife and 2 children. Let's stress this. In these documents, you can see it says that, have you received military training of any type? Yes. And that he has a wife and kids, but he left them behind to come to the United States. Why? Why is a Venezuelan with military training leaving his family behind to come to the United States?
Because it's an invasion. Because it's an invasion. So keep in mind, right? If your revolution is predicated on a coalition of the fringes, and Steve Tayler came up with that quote. So the coalition of the fringes, then in order to stay in power, you must increase the fringes. You must increase the destabilization. You must increase the amount of people in a government, polity, country, society, whatever you want to call it, that adhere or are at least dependent on you. And so the ability to bring in as many people as possible across the border is not a feature. It is not a unintended consequence. And conservatives need to stop thinking that these are unintended consequences. These are absolutely intended consequences. These are deliberate. The purpose of a system is what it does, and it is not going to stop on its own.
You talk about insurgents, the age of insurgency warfare. I mean, we just had 10 million illegal immigrants come across the border. Where are they? Do they have secret groups that they're planning?
Hold on. 10 million is what we had several years ago.
What we know about. I mean, how many?
That's who we know. And then you have millions over the past few years under Biden.
And how many of those in Russia, in Moscow? How many shooters were there? 6?
I think there were like 3.
3 killed 70 plus people?
It's hard to say at this point.
So there could have been more, but I mean,
of course it could. Like you said, this is only talking about like what we know.
And there's some that got away. So
sure.
This is what I was talking. I mentioned I was talking to a normie not that long ago, like a couple days ago, and part of it was illegal immigration leading to terror attacks, and whether or not that results in some kind of war where then there's no election.
I think it makes sense as a military commander to have insurgents in another country that then the sleeper cells will awaken and do the damage from within so that the country turns on its own people to try and defend themselves, causes mass chaos. You win without even having to attack. I mean, it's just the best tactic for an invading force, for an enemy force. So that they wouldn't do it here is insane. Obviously, they're going to try and do it here.
And what's the very first thing that we do with the illegals when we bring them across? And it's already been, I said this a while ago, it's already very clear. And Tayler and many others have been down there documenting this. We give them airplane tickets.
Yep.
We give them we give them tickets. So they already know, right? If you're going to put this into your TTPs, so what happens when you cross the border? Well, you get sent to processing, then you have to do some like little woo-woo hearing and, oh, that's fine. Oh, you just say the word asylum and you're good to go, basically. And then the very next thing that happens is you get handed an airplane ticket. Now, let's say you've got maybe 5 or 6 brothers along with you. Oh, guess what? Now you're on an airplane.
Yep.
Now you have the ability, and look, it's we don't even need like Muhammad Atta and 9/11 hijackers to learn, to sneak in the country. You just walk across.
The funny thing is,
it'd be so easy.
The Patriot Act allows for the, I believe, I could be wrong, indefinite detention of immigrants as they enter this country. So the issue isn't the Patriot Act. Actually, right now it's they are not using the Patriot Act for one of the purposes people were scared they were going to use it for, which is detaining immigrants as they enter the country. Now, people were saying immigrants. Specifically, I'm talking about the illegal immigrants, of which millions have crossed in the country without being stopped. And there is no mass enforcement against them. There is no iron fist government being like, we're going to take action against these illegal immigrants. None at all. And even Donald Trump is only saying, I'm going to enforce the law. It's like, oh, that's all he's going to do.
He did say the most massive deportation operation in
American history. All that's saying is like, I am going to engage in a large law enforcement operation to enforce the law. Like you can say whatever you want. If Trump came out and said something substantially more egregious, then I think there'd be grounds to criticize him. I think what we end up seeing with a lot of conservatives is they will take a moderate approach to their beliefs, thinking it'll win them more friends. And then the Democrats will argue the fringe far left, creating the middle ground of the left. So the compromise between a moderate and a leftist is going to be a left position. If the right is coming out and saying, at the bare minimum, we will just start enforcing the law, the left will then say, well, let's compromise on that then. And then the compromise with Democrats in Congress is going to end up being like, we deport only half.
The main thing that we need to get across to conservatives is the idea of reciprocity. And reciprocity means that anything they do to us, and you see what happens when they come for us, the swatting that we've both experienced, and the harassment, the censorship, the cancel culture, it's not going to just stop on its own. And so you think people say, to your point, right? We say, oh, well, we're going to compromise. We're going to do this. This is already the plan that they want that they're putting in place. It's anarcho-tyranny, the reason that the Patriot Act is not applied to select groups and is applied to others. Yeah, they're going to use it to look at your text messages, but they don't care about
let's talk. How is it that in New York they're arresting the homeowner? How is it that we've come to this point? And is it just a fringe one-off thing? Are we really at the arresting landlords phase?
Yes, absolutely.
Of course, every single time in this book, every single communist revolution comes to landlords.
Do you really believe that in New York City, in 100% of circumstances, when a squatter is at a house, the NYPD will show up and arrest the homeowner just like they did? Or do you think that those cops were just communists themselves?
Well, I think she broke a law by changing the locks when they said, don't change the locks. Well, don't do it. And she was like, okay, I'm going to go do it anyway.
That's not my question. My question is, let's say we replicate that scenario in New York 100 times. Squatters go into a house, homeowner shows up, squatters can't prove anything, cops then arrest the homeowner. Does that happen in the majority of cases, do you think, right now?
I think over 50%, yes.
My point is we're seeing a system.
Yeah.
We're seeing a systemized playbook that's laid out.
Look, in New York City, there are a lot of actual open communists in city government.
Yes.
They're community organizers, and they're in city government. That is going to spread. This does not stop.
Just too black pill for me, man.
Brother, it is happening, homeboy.
San Francisco will get it.
San
Francisco gets it next. Then it'll spread to like Madison, Wisconsin or something. Ian, Chicago.
But you think Madison, Wisconsin.
Ian, it's right.
You think Madison, Wisconsin police officers, the majority of the time, because it has to be the majority. I mean, 50% might even be too light. Like this has to be like typical enforcement. You're saying even in Madison, Wisconsin, Midwest, homeowner walks up to the house of a squatter there. They call the cops. The cops then say, you can't do anything about it. We'll arrest you if you do. And then it results in homeowners getting arrested. You think that'll happen in Madison?
Well, keep in mind, it's not the police saying it. It's what Phil's saying. It's the city government is requiring it to be enforced.
I'm specifically asking about the police. Because if the cops show up and say, I ain't enforcing that law, ain't no law getting enforced.
I think they will.
In Western Maryland, we have Second Amendment sanctuaries where the sheriff's offices have outright said we will not enforce state or federal gun laws in Maryland.
Sheriffs are different, but you don't have. No. Sheriffs are typically in
elected positions.
Well, sheriffs are always elected, the constitutional law enforcement. But in major cities, you don't really have sheriffs that way. You have that in rural counties, but in major cities, it's usually a police force where police they're employees of the city government.
Do you think that comes to Omaha?
Yes.
Eventually,
Omaha,
I don't think that it comes now. I don't think any of this.
Omaha's super live.
None of this stuff comes fast. First of all, but it comes to urban areas. So it probably doesn't get into, small towns and into rural areas. That tends to be where people
they don't have police departments.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is like the whole notion, the kind of impulse, the socialist impulse that you're seeing in cities all over the country. And it's not just happening in the United States. This is something that's happening. It's definitely happening in Canada. You can look at the laws that they're passing and the fact that they have like 3 openly communist parties in Canada. In Labour in the UK, there's tons of communists. There's Ash Sarkar, who's an open communist that I don't think she's actually an MP, but she's at least a talking head. Anyways, the point is the socialist impulse. It's experiencing a significant upswing, and you see a lot of it in existing governments at city levels. It's probably not significant at state levels, but I mean, just look at AOC. The squad are all, if they're not actually members of the DSA, they're at least they caucus with them and they're friendly with them and sympathetic to all those ideas. Those are the democratic socialists. These concepts have a goal. Like these political ideas have a goal in mind, and it doesn't matter if it's a step today or if it's 2 steps today. The point is, it's coming. I say this frequently. I wrote a record called "The Fall of Ideals" in 2006 because I smelled this stuff coming. And every single thing that I've worried about since in 2012, I released a record called "A War You Cannot Win" that like on the cover like was to cross AR-15s because there's all kinds of like American Revolution or American Second Revolution imagery in it. In 2010, I released a record called "For We Are Many," and it literally, the cover of it was NPCs. It wasn't the same idea, or it wasn't the same thing you see now, but it was the idea of some people are actually awake to these ideas and some people aren't. This stuff
was that one called?
That was called "For We Are Many," but this stuff has been coming for a long time, and I've been screaming about it, as much as I can. But like, these things don't stop unless they're stopped. Communists do not just let you live.
That's where I come in. Is like, we're not bystanders in this. We are leaders,
that it?
and people are listening.
There's the faces and stuff, and there's a couple people that kind of have the idea, and then there's other people that are just kind of NPCs. But that came out in 2010. These ideas I've been seeing coming, and I've seen this stuff for a long time now.
It's just, I'm not a bystander. I'm commanding and communicating with people and changing people on the daily, and I don't want people to lose hope. And if people really truly believe a communist thing is inevitable, they'll give up.
It's not about inevitable. It's about you have to make people aware. People still think I've been talking about this for 10 years, and people still think I'm crazy. Yes, totally.
They think it'll never come for them. Oh, it's just happening. It's happened to that. That guy down the street. Oh, it's just New York. It's just this landowner. Oh, because she didn't, follow the rule correctly. But no, this movement is based in envy and greed. And when you use those sins and those vices and tell people that it is good to be envious of other people's property and other people's things and other people's success, and in fact those people are your oppressors and you must rise up and tear them down and tear away the things that they have, it will always end like this.
We actually had a police officer approach one of our staff requesting to come on the show and talk about the issue of policing, I guess. And I don't know in what context.
Like a currently serving?
A
local or?
I don't want to say too much just yet for the officer's privacy, but I believe more than just like patrol, like a higher ranking, maybe a sergeant or something.
Is it like a comms person who wants to come on?
No.
Okay.
No, actual, and more than just like beat cop. Like, so I don't know to what extent or whatever, but I said absolutely 100%. Because the question is right now, you have a lot of people who have maintained this back to blue no matter who mentality, where you have CBP willfully and knowingly trafficking children into sex slavery. And you still have conservatives say, I don't blame them for it. It's not their fault. It's Biden's fault. I'm like, the guy who took the child, it's his fault. Nope. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess. I don't agree. You have people who right now don't care that when it comes down to it at CBP, the individuals are the ones committing this action. Like, I get Joe Biden, yeah, bad guy, hold him responsible, but you got to hold the individuals who do it responsible too. Imagine like a guy orchestrates a bank robbery and he hires a bunch of gangsters to help him, and they go, no, don't arrest the gangsters. They were just hired. They didn't know what they were doing. They just went along with committing the crime, but it's the guy who planned it. That's who's got to go to jail. Well, of course, they all do. But unfortunately, there are still many of those traditional conservatives who have long been back to blue no matter who. It's like, well, you're going to end up with a communist wearing a badge and you're going to say, I back you. And he's going to be like, he's going to do the red salute. And you're going to go, don't know what that's all about. And then he's going to say, come with me to the gulag. And you go, whatever you say, officer.
Speaking of gulags, what in your new book, Inhumans, like, do you get into the stuff that was going on in gulags, or do you get in, or are you more talking about like the conditions that led up to putting people in gulags, or what?
It is more focused because, look, I mean, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. Gulag Archipelago's out there, Solzhenitsyn's out there. There's been so many books written about the bad conditions of communism. We do touch on basically all of the facts, but what we're really interested in Unhumans is this idea that how do these things get started, and at what point can you stop them? And because I feel like that's kind of what we all sort of are talking around, that we know it's going to get bad if this thing starts. So at what point can you actually put the brakes on it and do things that meaningfully have an effect in the real world, as opposed to just like, being outraged about it all the time?
Let me ask you guys a question. can police officers enforce the law selectively?
Personally, I think that they should be able to, because I think
that's not what I asked. Is it?
Can they? Well, of course they can.
You can walk
because-
off the force.
Yeah.
So you have never encountered a situation where you've done something wrong and a cop said, "Don't worry about it."
Yeah,
Give you a warning?
that's what I said. They can. They have the option.
They can, and they do all day, every single day.
Can they? Yes, obviously. We know that people are
But
not
it's-
out.
but it's-
If you're going over 35, if you're at 36, you're not getting pulled over if you're in a 35.
It is 100% selective enforcement. Tickets in Chicago, I haven't gotten one in 20 years. Actually, when you speed, it says to what degree we're speeding. It says 0 through 5, 5 through 10, 10 to 20, and they check mark.
That's funny. The zeros on there.
It is.
I was speeding 0 miles over. That means I wasn't speeding.
But it's 0 through
Anyway,
5. I
okay,
guess the idea is, but they absolutely, if you're 1 mile over, they can, but they never do. It's weird to me that people hold this belief that police cannot selectively enforce the law when they quite literally have to selectively enforce the law. If you are speeding 7 miles over the limit and a cop says, "I'm going to pull that guy over," and then a guy goes, boom, and zooms past you at 100, he leaves you behind. He doesn't say, nope, nope, nope. I'll call that one in, but I'm enforcing the law here. No, he leaves, and you're off the hook. And there's also the issuing of warnings. There's in my life growing up in having lived in several major cities, I think it's an absurdity, and I don't know where this idea comes from that police don't selectively enforce law when it's quite literally police discretion is a requirement of the job. If they're wasting time and resources by going after low-level crime, they could get yelled at. If it's minor, and then the community will yell and complain. There are laws like we famously joked about the blue law in Florida, which claimed women weren't allowed to skydive on Sundays. Not a single police officer would ever respond to that call. Growing up in Chicago, a homeless guy was attacking my family's business, banging on the windows, trying to break it, and the police did not show up for it. It is typical and normal that police selectively choose to enforce law. The problem then becomes, why do we get these stories where a cop, the one I like to bring up, which is a very egregious example, the officer who pulled over the woman in New Jersey because she had her gun with her, for which she is legally permitted, he could have just said, "Ma'am, I'm going to drive you around this clover leaf. We're going to send you back to Philly. You can't have a gun in the state." No, instead he said, 60-year-old woman should go to prison for the rest of her life. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.